and hidden knowledge, and also kind of science kind of blended in there. We talked last month about energy and how interesting it is, because the yogis have been saying it forever. Science now proves it, how we're 99.999% energy. And of course, the big question was, well, and everyone asked, and I asked myself, well, if everything's energy, right, and there's big gaps between everything, how come I can't put my hand, through my arm? How come I can't put my hand through the computer, right? If it's just all energy and there's nothing really material, why is that? And we use the idea of the fan, and that a fan, if you've got 3 blades or 3 thin blades, you've got these blades and everything is gaps or space. And if you speed it up, and you speed it up really fast, it'll look solid. If you try to put your hand through it, right, you're going to get a bit of pain. And it appears solid. But that's what happens, because atoms are made of, which we're made of, are 99.9% energy, but they've got all these electrons that are spinning. There's billions of them, and they're spinning very, very, very fast. And they give the illusion of solidity. And, that's what happens. So our mind can't see the gaps. This is the thing. We can't see the gaps. So solid things become solid for that particular reason. And under a certain microscope, electron something or another microscope, if you put it to your arm, you would see just energy. So what we want to do is we want to give you where that special microscope is, right? So that you can start to see the gaps. You can start to see beyond the gaps, and then you can start to touch the energy. Right? You can touch the energy, which is 99.9% of everything, and it's infinite. And the microscope, the microscope happens to be in your midbrain. Right? We're going to look at that in a sec. The hypothalamus, right? And that's where Anjana is. That's where the pineal is. And it's where you move your consciousness in Ishtakriya through the 2 lobes of the brain to the crown. Right? And when that moves through there, then you're in that delta rhythm, you're in samadhi. Right? And that's where you begin to feel the greater intelligence. That's when you tap into all of this knowledge. I mean, I'm sure you've seen teachers. I mean, Sadhguru is the most prominent. You see him, he's on the internet everywhere, and someone can ask him a question about anything, and he's got an answer. I mean, he's not thinking about it. The answer just comes because he's tapped into, you can call it the Akashic Records. Some people refer to it as that. But you've got access to all knowledge, all information, past, present, future in that particular moment. And that's what happens, right? And we need to know that. We need to know this, because otherwise you end up suffering. And the biggest suffering is the fear of death. Because if we don't understand this, matter, which is all the mind sees, is impermanent. And matter is going to die. And so we suffer because of all of that. And all the stuff we're attached to, we suffer because it's impermanent. Right? But if you can learn what the 99.99% is, then you'll be free. This is the gift of the yogis. Then you will be free. And, the pineal gland, right, here, it's placed in the epithalamus, right, near the middle of the brain here. This is where you're focusing when you're doing your meditation, Ishtakriya. You're focusing here. This is where your attention's going back about 3 inches into here, and it's within the 2 hemispheres of the brain, and it's tucked into a groove where the 2 halves of the thalamus are attached, right? And the epithalamus in some species, like some amphibians and reptiles, it's associated with a light sensing organ, right? Identified as what they call the parietal eye. In other words, it's further described as the pineal eye or the third eye. And this is what we want to learn to start to see with. And, it's been shown in imagery, for thousands of years. All the ancient civilizations knew this. All the big religions know this. The pineal is shown as it looks like a pine cone. So you see it everywhere. You see it in government, you see it all this sort of stuff, because they know this is where the power is, right? If we can access this. And the thalamus is composed of different kind of nuclei. And they serve different roles. And part of it is ranging from relaying sensory and motor information. But here's the thing. It also regulates consciousness and alertness, right? So ask yourself, the pineal gland has photoreceptors, right? It has photoreceptors. So what is something that is sitting in the middle of your brain, in the dark, surrounded by bone? Why does it have photoreceptors? Right? It's in the dark where the sun's never going to shine, right? So what happens is when we can activate this third eye, it has the ability to see wavelength information that is outside the ability of the two eyes or ears, if you like. Our senses are very limited. We can only see a very narrow framework. So, for example, the ears can hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. So below 20 is subsonic, and supersonic is above that range. Right? There's a much bigger range. And eyes can't see infrared or ultraviolet. Right? We can't see all of that. But that information is all there. Our senses are only designed for 3D, right? For us to have experiences. But to be able to access this stuff, you've got to go beyond the senses to activate it. That's why it's so important to train over and over to bring the senses back in. The senses are only there to have experiences in 3D. Right? So full yoga meditation activates the pineal gland to be able to download, and this is why it's got photoreceptors, to download universal light energy and information. Call it Akashic records if you like, right? All knowledge that exists. It's what happens when, if you've done things like plant medicine, DMT, which is activating the pineal gland, but it's not really done in a witness consciousness. Right? It's very different. All right. So it's important to understand that your body will follow a frequency and it's going to respond. So, for example, the third eye, Anshana, the command center, is 144 hertz. Right? So when that frequency drops, your chakras are no longer in balance. Because your chakras, the best way to look at it is like they're USB junction ports that connect to your body, right? Because everything about us is electrical. When we die, right, the electrical energy leaves the body and it decomposes. So chakras themselves emit only one frequency. And that frequency is synced into a particular element and a sense. So when it's out of tune, everything related to that element and sense will be off center. So last month we did chakra badana, and that was about balancing all of these, right? All of these frequencies. So the intent, so you can go back and reference that. And it's like, if one of them's out of tune, it affects everything else. It's, like when you hear a violin and it's out of tune, it's very grating. But it's like that. We're doing that all the time. So, in Chakra Badana, we use mantras to balance each frequency. We use yantras, particular shapes, forms to do that. Right? We use different practices to do that. Crystals can do that. Crystals are very interesting because crystals, like each crystal, it's kind of like a what would you call it? A lattice network that emits only one frequency. So, for example, you can use rose quartz to balance the heart chakra. but crystals, a lot of people keep all their crystals together. But what that does is it causes all the chaos like beta, because all these frequencies are distorting each other. Like crystals, because they emit one frequency, should be kept separate. You know, rose quartz should be here, and tiger's eye should be over here, and carmelite should be over here, because they do different frequencies. Anyway, getting aside. So when the wavelengths have the same frequency and the amplitudes match, that's samadhi. So when the left and right brain has the same frequency and the same amplitude, the same size of the wavelengths, then it matches, and that's samadhi. If they don't match, you get a cancellation effect. It's like noise reduction headphones, right? They put a frequency in that counters the noise outside, so it cancels it. But that's kind of what happens in our life. We get all this conflict in our life, and we find it hard to manifest what we want in life because we put out these frequencies that cancel each other out. Yeah, and that's normal beta stuff. A whole bunch of frequencies that are distorted, and often they're canceling, each other out. And the left brain is the part that's trying to do that. The left brain is going, I'm uncertain, I'm confused, cynicism, pessimism, all that sort of stuff. But when we have samadhi, the light switches on the inside, right? And you kind of pop out, right? Your wavelength gets so low and slowed down, you kind of actually pop out and you start matching the field, the underlying field, right? Chitta, if you like. And that's when the magic happens. You get all the downloads, the insight, the inspiration, you get access passes to higher knowledge, all of that sort of stuff. And this happens through the pineal gland. So this is kind of, I just put this in so you understand, wavelength is from one crest to another. Amplitude is the height of the wave. And when they synchronize, they become extremely focused, laser-like. In yoga, we call that samyana, right? Samyama. And that's when the frequency, the wavelength, and the amplitudes all match. So the last three yoga limbs, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, when they all come together, that's called samyama. And it creates a laser-like focus. Because normally the focus of the mind is it's like a light globe, a bunch of different frequencies that emit a kind of distorted light. It's not very powerful. But when you bring light and you concentrate it and you bring the wavelengths and amplitudes and you match them, it becomes super, super powerful. Laser can cut through metal, cut through crystal. And that's what happens to our mind. And wherever we direct it into the field, we're going to get that information. That's a whole other topic. We can talk about that one day if you want to, like the holographic nature of the universe and the holographic nature of the mind, and how through what the yogis say, how we actually tap into and access this Akashic records, right? This higher information, how it actually works through science and the yogis. Like later on, through samyama, that's why we do the grounding mantras in Ishtakriya, because we want to bring that laser focus and clarity back into life through our psychic centers, through the chakras, and we bring it back into life. We bring that clarity, we bring that focus, that understanding, that insight, and we bring it back into life. This is interesting, right? You can have a research online, and you can research the gateway process. So in the 1980s, the US military was trying to weaponize these, like the samadhi process. It was training soldiers to match their brainwave frequencies that left and right go, in our words, go into the samadhi process. And then what they were doing is called remote viewing, so that they could project their consciousness, into the future, into the past, and start to look at what's going on and look at weapons and all this sort of stuff, right? They mapped it out incredibly. They declassified it in 2004, but the document is incredibly detailed and informative. It's very, very good if you're interested in that sort of stuff, right? It kind of shows illustrations and maps it out.